So my name is Striegel. I'm currently an associate professor, an associate chair in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering here at the University of Notre Dame. I live up in Granger, Indiana. I grew up actually in northwest Iowa in a small town called Lytton, Iowa. I had originally gone to school in my hometown, so this was a small town of about 300 people. It actually merged the school with the town nearby, so we went to a high school of all of a graduating class of about 50 students. From my high school in Rockwell City, Lytton, then I went to Iowa State University, where I did both my Bachelor's of Science in Computer Engineering, and then I got my PhD 4 years later, also in Computer Engineering. So that is a great question. I decided I wanted to be an engineer, I'd say about in middle school. So I knew I'd liked to do things with computers. I knew I liked math. About that time, I'd done a couple of engineering camps. I did a summer program where we studied computer science a bit early, although at the time I didn't know I wanted to do computer science and engineering. Did a couple of camps along the way, and it just seemed to be a natural fit. Everyone had sort of counseled me saying, we think engineering would be a great fit, and it turns out it really was. In terms of choosing the discipline, originally I had thought I wanted to be an aerospace and mechanical engineer, so I'd actually gone even so far as to visit a certain school to the north of us that shall remain nameless. So I actually went and visited. I did a lot of chatting with family members. And in particular, I had one of my uncles had worked at the Pentagon, and he had suggested perhaps aerospace might not be the best future for you. You should think about maybe a different kind of engineering. And at that time, I said, oh, I like computers. I'd done a lot of work kind of helping around, doing some jobs, helping with some billing and data entry. And I said, okay, I think I'll try this computer engineering thing. And I think this is the track that I'd like to try. And it was, in retrospect, a great decision. At the time, it just seemed to be what I had an aptitude for and seemed to enjoy. So I grew up Catholic. So now I grew up in northwest Iowa. We were one of 2 Catholic families in our town. So every Thursday we would make the trek over to go to a nearby town for CCD. So every Thursday afternoon or Thursday evening that we did that. It's actually my faith journey is what led me to Notre Dame. So when I had been looking for jobs after, as I was finishing up my PhD, there happened to be an ad for Notre Dame. And I said, well, I'm Catholic, my wife is Catholic, or my soon-to-be wife is Catholic, and I said, we should apply to Notre Dame. That seems like a great idea. It's almost painful to admit this, but I didn't know exactly where Notre Dame was. I knew of Notre Dame, I knew from football, but I couldn't have pointed it out in a map. It ended up being that I came out and had a wonderful time at Notre Dame, and that I was very appreciative that my faith, a little bit of a nudge, said, hey, maybe Notre Dame is the right fit for you, and it's been remarkably wonderful here being at Notre Dame. So I would be what would sort of be termed a pure academic. So I'd done a few internships along the way. So originally at the end of my sophomore year, I had a chance to go work for Fisher Controls, which was now Emerson Process. I'd also done a few internships during the summer along the way. After that, I looked at full-time employment because this was sort of the end of the 90s. So this was the dot-com preview, jobs were everywhere. And I'd put in an application for graduate school, not being entirely serious. It just seemed to be, well, maybe I might want to do graduate school. I enjoyed teaching different topics, and I put in an app. They ended up having a nice fellowship that lined up well, and then I ended up starting doing my master's. After I'd worked on my master's a little bit, I said, well, maybe I want to teach. They let me try out teaching under the guise that I would be working towards my doctorate. And it ended up being that I ended up finding an advisor who I really worked well with. And then I ended up sticking around for my PhD. And then along the way, I did a few internships as well during my graduate work. But academia seemed to be a very nice fit, and I never really left. So I am currently an associate professor and associate chair, so my time is split. I do about half-time administration, which deals with junior faculty mentoring. There's a lot of work with regards to accreditation in terms of the university and our department that I focus on. The other half is split roughly between research and teaching. So I do a fair amount of mentoring of my graduate students to help them do whatever sort of research problems. We tend to do a fair amount of work on wireless networking, so we're interested in when you go to the football game at the stadium, why is your Wi-Fi terrible? And so we try to figure out how do we actually make that better. The other part of the time then I'm teaching a class, typically like an undergraduate class. This semester I'm teaching one in operating systems then. And so it's a nice balance between teaching and research in addition to the normal sort of management and administration that I do. So I would say in part where my faith has played a role is thinking about the types of problems that I might work on and thinking about making sure that there's some sort of a social justice component that comes to it. That there's strong research that we want to do, that the community tends to do, but there should be at least some component of the research that has some sort of broader impact or some sort of thinking about how do we make things less expensive. How do we maybe do outreach that might not get us the flashy publications that we would like, but it still is very important. So it shapes the type of problems that we might want to look at in that we try to find things where we're truly making a difference, not just for us here in the US, but perhaps much more broadly. In terms of maybe how my engineering has shaped my faith, it's caused me to get involved in the local community. So we got involved with the local parochial school when it was constructed, and we spent roughly about 3 weeks trying to get their computer system all set up. It guides me how I get involved in my kids' classes and how we participate in the community then too. So I would say probably the best one that connects it is we did some work called WeHab, and the gist of WeHab, it kind of came out of teaching a class at Notre Dame, but the part that was interesting from a social justice standpoint was one of the things you run into with rehab is that it tends to be expensive to buy well-instrumented force plates, so they can cost on the order of several $1,000s, and the crux of this work was, could we take something like a Nintendo Wii balance board, which is very cheap, and then could we actually make that work? And the interesting implication was we could then ship this out for free. Anybody could use it, and that all they would need is a Nintendo Wii balance board, and that was it. And so that was a very interesting project because it dramatically changed the cost of doing some of these exercises. And in part, that's, you know, our faith teaches us that we should look out for those who are less fortunate, and that was a nice sort of outreach from that sort of guided us to that project. So I would say to young engineers, listen to your inner voice. So listen, do prayerful reflection, because oftentimes you know the answer internally or you know it through prayer. And sometimes that can be sort of drowned out. You know, seek out mentors, seek out individuals who you know who also share your same faith. Ask them questions, ask them how they arrived at their particular decisions. Oftentimes you know. There's sort of a peace or a sort of just general sort of feeling that you get, you know, I think in large part inspired by God, that you just know that you feel that in you. And through reflection and just mindful consideration, oftentimes you can arrive at that. I've been very fortunate in my career. A lot of times the things that I've done have been very, I wouldn't say accidental, but a bit more by chance. So in part, choosing to go to graduate school was sort of something that I had in the back of my mind, and what ended up happening is there was a fellowship, and that sort of nudged me over. Choosing to come to Notre Dame was just, I happened to see an ad, and I thought, this seems to be like a nice fit. You'd be surprised that when you give things a chance or you sort of do a bit of prayerful reflection, how well things can turn out. They say sort of God has a plan for everyone. In some sense, for me, I definitely feel that. in terms of my career choices and how I've been guided. And I would say it's just, the world today is very busy. It's very easy with all of the smartphones and internet to sort of get overwhelmed, but finding quiet time to reflect is a really important part of a young engineer's life, and I think anybody's life, to think about how do we make important decisions, and then how do we be mindful of our environment and our family and our faith.